Today we are dissecting a source document that, well, on its surface, it claims to be this very straightforward educational transcript.
Right, yeah, from a program called Advanced Learner Studio.
Exactly. And honestly, if you just glance at it, you might totally mistake it for a standard language lesson, for non-native English speakers.
It definitely reads like that at first pass, just grammar and vocabulary.
Yeah, but our mission for this deep dive is entirely different. We're going to show you why this document is actually this profound, highly stealthy psychological roadmap.
Stealthy is the perfect word for it, honestly.
Right, because we are exploring the powerful, often invisible connection between the vocabulary we use to describe our goals and the actual physical reality we end up creating for our futures.
And the core of what we are unpacking today is how a person's ability to conceptualize their own ambitions scales perfectly with their linguistic complexity.
Which is just a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It really is. I mean, our goal is to decode the language of hope, of strategic planning, and of personal growth. Because what this source brilliantly maps out, whether they did this intentionally or just, as a byproduct of teaching vocabulary, is that moving from simple expressions of desire to nuanced philosophical concepts of purpose isn't just about sounding more articulate.
But it's not just a vocabulary test.
Exactly. It is literally about reframing your cognitive limits and, by extension, your entire life's trajectory.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I am so excited to get into the weeds here.
Let's do it.
So the source scales its lessons from what it calls the A2 foundation level.
Which is basic everyday communication.
Right, all the way up to C1, C2 mastery, which involves really complex abstract thought.
And we are going to trace the psychological evolution of ambition through these exact linguistic stages.
Yeah, so at the absolute ground floor, the A2 level, the document highlights 3 core phrases that people use to state a dream.
The very basics.
Right, so first we have the direct and informal, I want to learn Spanish, or I want to travel to Japan.
Super common. We use it constantly.
Exactly. Then we have the polite and formal version, which is, I would like to. The text actually notes this is often used in job interviews or like when you're buying a car.
It adds that layer of social awareness.
Right. And finally, we have the concrete intention, which is, I'm going to. Like, next summer, I'm going to visit my family in Canada.
So let's look at the underlying cognitive mechanisms here, starting with that first one, the I want to.
Yeah, because it seems so harmless.
It does. And the source categorizes this as expressing a simple desire. But psychologically speaking, a simple desire is merely a statement of a current internal state.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, it is completely devoid of any structural commitment. When someone says, I want to learn Spanish, they are not actually initiating a plan. Right. They are just passively observing their own emotional preference in that exact moment.
It's just an observation, like looking out the window and saying, oh, the sky is blue. You aren't doing anything about it.
Precisely. And there is a very real, measurable neurochemical danger in getting stuck at this baseline level of language.
Wait, really? A neurochemical danger?
Oh, absolutely. Stating a desire out loud often provides the brain with a premature hit of dopamine.
Oh, wow. So just saying it rewards you?
Yes. You say, I want to start a business. And your brain briefly simulates the feeling of having started that business. You get the reward, that little rush of satisfaction, without enduring any of the actual friction or labor required to achieve it.
So you basically trick your own brain into feeling accomplished just by stating a preference.
Exactly. You hijack your own reward system.
That is wild. But it makes so much sense. I mean, that explains why some people could spend a decade saying, I want to write a book, but they never actually write a single page.
Because they're getting the emotional payoff just from talking about it at dinner parties. The linguistic phrasing itself removes the urgency.
Right.
And moving to the second phrase, the I would like to part, it doesn't actually solve this problem. It merely dresses it up.
Yeah, the text points out that this phrase introduces formality.
Right. It tempers that raw, somewhat childish demand of I want with a layer of conditional politeness.
It acknowledges that you aren't the only person in the room.
Exactly.
But, reading through the transcript, I would like to, still feels incredibly passive to me.
It absolutely is passive.
Right. Like if I'm sitting in a job interview and I say, I would like to take on more leadership responsibilities, I am essentially waiting for the person across the desk to grant me permission.
Yes. You are placing the power entirely in their hands.
Exactly. I'm acknowledging their agency over my future, not my own.
Which is why the critical psychological pivot happens when the text introduces that third phrase.
The I'm going to.
Yes. The source defines this as a concrete plan that has already been decided upon.
It's a lock.
Exactly. The moment you shift your internal narrative or your external communication from want to I'm going to, you force a confrontation with reality.
You know, the analogy that jumps out at me here is the difference between window shopping, speaking politely to a sales clerk, and actually putting down a non-refundable deposit.
Oh, that's a great way to frame it.
Right. Because when you're just window shopping, which is using I want to, you're just standing on the sidewalk looking at a watch in the display case, it costs you absolutely nothing.
Zero risk.
Yeah, zero risk. You can say it all day long and your life remains completely unchanged. Then you step inside the store and say, I would like to look at that watch.
The second phase.
Right. You've engaged with reality, you're interacting with external forces, but you can still just hand the watch back and walk away without spending a dime.
But the phrase I'm going to changes the fundamental nature of the transaction.
Yes. When you say, I am going to buy that watch, the credit card is literally on the counter. You've crossed a threshold.
The decision has been made.
And backing out now requires you to actively break a commitment.
And psychologically, this taps directly into cognitive dissonance.
Also,
Well, if you declare to yourself, and especially to others, I am going to learn Spanish this year, you have established a firm intention in the physical world.
you've put it on the record.
Right. If you then spend the next 6 months doing absolutely nothing about it, you experience the psychological discomfort of your actions not matching your stated identity.
Oh, that makes sense. That friction.
Exactly. The phrase I'm going to is the trigger that initiates that pressure. It forces you to either execute or admit failure.
Which is a huge forcing function. I mean, I want you, the person listening to this right now, to just pause for a second and genuinely audit your own language.
It's a tough thing to do, but so necessary.
It really is. Think about the massive overarching goals in your life. When you describe them, which of those three phrases is your default? Are you window shopping your own future, or have you actually put down the deposit?
It is a sobering self-assessment for a lot of people.
Definitely.
However, while establishing that firm intention is crucial, we have to remember it is still only the foundation.
Right, it's just the A2 level.
Exactly. The phrase I'm going to provides the initial momentum, but as the source material demonstrates, intention alone lacks the architecture to survive the complexities of the real world.
Right. I mean, you can pour the concrete for a foundation, but you can't live in a foundation.
No, you can't.
If a storm comes, you are completely exposed. To build the actual house, to give your ambition some real scaffolding, the source outlines a necessary evolution in our vocabulary. We have to start exploring the why and the how.
And this is exactly where we transition into what the text categorizes as the explorer phase of language.
The B1 tier.
Yes. The focus shifts from simply stating a goal to adding depth, reason, and strategic stepping stones. And notice the specific vocabulary upgrade the text introduces here.
What are they swapping out?
We're instructed to move away from using the word dream and begin utilizing words like ambition or aspiration.
I found that distinction so fascinating when I was reading through the source. The text explicitly notes that these words sound, quote, more serious and formal.
Which they do.
They do, but I think it goes much deeper than just formality. Think about the nature of a dream. A dream is something that happens to you involuntarily while you are unconscious.
You're passive.
Completely passive. You have very little control over it. You wake up and go, wow, that was a crazy dream. And ambition, on the other hand, requires you to be wide awake. It requires active, conscious pursuit.
I love that. The transition from dream to ambition essentially signifies taking ownership.
Exactly.
And to illustrate how this ownership works in practice, the source provides a couple of highly instructive examples here. We have the individual whose overarching goal is to become a chef.
Right, the culinary student.
Yeah. And they don't just stop at the declaration, they articulate the process. They say, my goal is to become a chef, so the first step is to go to cooking school.
And then there's the other example of the person who wants to live in Italy. The language they use is very, very specific.
What do they say?
They say, I've set a goal for myself to save enough money over the next 2 years. The first step is taking Italian classes online.
It's broken down.
Yeah, they are taking this massive nebulous desire, moving to a foreign country, and breaking it down into an immediate, actionable step today.
What is truly vital in those examples, though, is the introduction of two incredibly powerful linguistic tools.
Okay, lay them out for us.
The words because and so that.
Oh, yeah.
The text highlights that a key skill at this stage of development is the ability to explain the underlying reason behind a goal. For instance, I want to become fluent in Italian so that I can genuinely connect with local people.
Or, I am taking this class because it will advance my career.
Exactly.
So let's dissect the actual mechanism of those two words. Why is adding a because so critical to actually achieving an ambition?
Because human motivation is inherently fragile.
Very true.
Without a because, an action has no anchor. Think about the realities of learning a new language. It is incredibly tedious.
Oh, it's brutal. Flashcards forever.
Right. It requires rote memorization, and you will frequently feel foolish or frustrated. If your only internal narrative is simply, I am going to take Italian classes, what happens on a Tuesday evening when you are exhausted from work, it's raining outside, and you are struggling to conjugate verbs?
You quit. You just close the laptop and turn on a movie.
Exactly. You quit because the immediate friction outweighs the stated intention. The action is untethered.
But anyway.
But, however, if your internal narrative is, I am taking these classes so that I can connect with the locals when I move to Rome, you have created a psychological tether.
A lifeline to the future.
You have bound the immediate, mundane, difficult task to your deepest, most vibrant emotional aspiration. You are linking the short-term pain to a high-value, long-term reward.
It's basically delay, discounting, and reverse.
That's exactly what it is.
You're bringing the emotional weight of the future reward into the present moment to help you overcome the current friction. And the word because is literally the bridge that connects the two.
Precisely. And this brings us to a nuance in this section of the text that, honestly, often trips people up.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to bring up.
Alongside this focus on concrete steps and concrete reasons, the text introduces the phrase, hope to.
Yes.
It gives the example, I hope to graduate next year, and notes, this is appropriate for large goals that are not 100% certain, but that you are actively working towards.
And this is exactly where I need to push back on the text.
I figured you might.
Because look, we just spent all this time establishing that I'm going to is vastly superior to I want to, because it represents firm intention and commitment, right?
Right, the non-refundable deposit.
Exactly. So if I say I hope to graduate or I hope to start a business, doesn't that sound inherently weaker than saying I am going to graduate?
I see why you'd say that.
It just feels like a massive regression. It sounds like you're giving yourself a linguistic escape hatch in case you fail. Like, well, then only hoped it would happen.
I totally understand that interpretation. It sounds softer. But if we look closer at the psychology of high achievement, introducing hope to at this stage is not a regression at all.
It isn't.
No. It is actually a marker of immense psychological maturity and resilience.
Okay, you're going to have to explain the mechanics of that because it still sounds like a complete cop-out to me.
It comes down to understanding the locus of control.
Okay.
The phrase, I'm going to, is incredibly effective, yes, but it should only be applied to actions over which you have absolute direct agency.
Meaning things I can physically do myself.
Exactly. I am going to take a cooking class. I am going to save $50 from this paycheck. You control those inputs entirely.
Okay, that makes sense. No one can stop me from saving $50.
Right. But massive aspirations like graduating from a rigorous university, starting a successful business, relocating to a foreign country, those involve countless external variables that you simply do not control.
That's fair.
You do not control the macroeconomy. You do not control the visa approval process. You do not control the unpredictable nature of an illness or a sudden family emergency.
So if you apply I'm going to those massive unpredictable outcomes, you're basically setting yourself up for a crisis.
You are creating a brittle worldview based on absolute certainty.
Oh, brittle. That's a good word for it.
Because if you say, I'm going to move to Italy in exactly 12 months, and then a global geopolitical event halts all immigration, your framework shatters.
You'd be devastated.
You view it as a personal failure because you guaranteed the outcome. But by utilizing hope to for the macro goal, while strictly using I'm going to for the micro steps, you build a resilient mindset.
You're saying, I control my daily actions, and I hope those actions eventually yield this specific outcome, but I acknowledge that the universe has a say in the matter.
Exactly.
It's the difference between arrogance, which assumes total control over reality, and true confidence, which focuses on controlling your own inputs while remaining adaptable.
And adaptability is crucial because as soon as you start breaking these massive ambitions down into actionable steps, as soon as you tether them with a profound because, you inevitably crash headfirst into reality.
You hit the wall.
You are going to encounter severe roadblocks. And navigating those roadblocks requires a completely different cognitive approach than simply stating your aspirations.
Right. You can't just be an enthusiastic explorer anymore. You have to become analytical.
Yes.
Which leads directly into the next evolution in the source material. We're moving into the B2 phase, the analyst phase.
And this phase represents a drastic shift in the nature of the vocabulary. We move completely away from the emotionally charged language of desires and dreams, and we enter the clinical, highly strategic language of project management.
It gets very serious here.
Very. The text introduces the necessity of distinguishing between short-term and long-term goals. It stresses that goals must be achievable and realistic.
Which explicitly alludes to frameworks like SMART goals, right?
Absolutely. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
And the example the source provides here is incredibly revealing. We are introduced to this speaker named Emma.
Emma is a great case study.
She really is.
Yeah.
Her long-term goal is starting her own business. But listen to how she frames this ambition. She doesn't rely on passion or hope at all.
No, she doesn't.
She meticulously maps the architecture of the pursuit. She states that her immediate short-term goal is to gain experience and build a professional network. And her specific strategy for executing this is to actively take on leadership roles in her current job in order to acquire management skills.
Notice the specific verbs she's utilizing there.
Yeah, acquire.
Acquire a skill, develop expertise, implement a strategy. These words intentionally strip all the romance away from the ambition.
The dreamer dies and the architect takes over.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it.
Yep.
Because why is this necessary? Because raw emotion is incredibly volatile. Passion might be the initial spark that makes you want to start a business, but passion will not sustain you through the mundane, agonizing realities of securing capital.
Or navigating tax law.
Or managing difficult employees. Calculated execution is what sustains you.
The text highlights an idiom here that perfectly captures this clinical mindset. It's the phrase, to set your sights on something.
Oh, that's a powerful one.
It really is. When I read that, the image that immediately came to my mind was a navigator on a ship locking onto a specific coordinate, or like a sniper looking through a scope.
Very precise.
When you set your sights on a single point, you are inherently blurring out everything else. The entire periphery goes dark.
It requires immense boundary setting.
Exactly. You are actively filtering out all other distractions, all competing desires, and all alternative paths to lock onto one mathematically achievable target.
You're saying no to 100 good ideas to execute on one specific strategy.
Right. And Emma's example in the text goes even further. She doesn't just outline her strategy, she actively anticipates the friction.
She looks for the problems.
Yes. She states that her biggest obstacle is the financial risk and the need for significant capital.
Which is where this linguistic framework becomes brilliant.
Why is that?
Think about it. When she identifies the lack of money, her response isn't emotional despair.
Oh, right. She doesn't say, I'm too poor to do this, it's hopeless.
Exactly. She frames it as a character requirement. She says she needs to be disciplined and persistent about saving.
She pivots immediately to a solution.
Yes. And this brings us to perhaps the most important psychological function of this analytical vocabulary.
Okay.
It serves to protect the ego.
Wait, I need you to walk me through the mechanics of that. How does clinical language protect your ego?
Okay, let's compare two individuals facing the exact same failure.
Sure.
Person A is still operating primarily at the foundation level of language, the A2 level.
Okay.
They've been telling everyone, I want to start a business. When they run out of money and the venture collapses, how do they internalize that?
Usually pretty badly.
They likely view it as a deep personal failing. The internal narrative becomes, I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't good enough. I am a failure.
The failure is completely enmeshed with their identity.
Yes. It's an indictment of who they are as a person.
Ouch. Yeah.
Now look at person B, who's operating with the vocabulary of an analyst. They hit the exact same financial wall, the same bankruptcy.
Okay.
But because they possess words like strategy, logistics, and obstacle, they do not internalize the failure.
I see.
They recognize that an obstacle is an external entity. It is a puzzle that requires a new strategy, not a reflection of their inherent worth.
They're completely depersonalizing the friction.
Completely. Think of it like this. If a bridge collapses while an engineer is building it, the engineer doesn't typically conclude they are a fundamentally worthless human being.
No, they blame the math.
Right. They conclude that their load-bearing calculations were incorrect or that the steel was substandard. They identify the external failure point and they adjust the blueprint.
That is brilliant. By calling a lack of capital an obstacle, Emma is giving herself permission to troubleshoot it rather than cry over it.
Yeah.
She turns her own life into an engineering problem. This linguistic shift acts as emotional body armor, protecting her drive from being crushed by inevitable setbacks.
And the adoption of constraints like ensuring a goal is achievable and time-bound in that SMART framework also plays a massive role in bypassing our neurological fear response.
You mean the amygdala?
Yes, exactly. When you set a massive, vague goal like, I am going to completely change my career, the brain often perceives the sheer magnitude of that unknown as a threat.
It freaks out.
The amygdala activates, triggering anxiety, procrastination, and paralysis. We freeze because the goal is too large and unstructured to process safely.
The classic deer-in-the-headlights response to our own ambition. I know that feeling well.
We all do. But when you utilize analytical language to break that massive threat down into a highly specific, time-bound microtask, for example, I will spend 45 minutes this Tuesday updating the skills section of my resume, the brain no longer perceives a threat.
Because 45 minutes on a Tuesday isn't scary.
Exactly. You have constrained the ambition into something manageable. The analytical vocabulary literally down-regulates the fear response, allowing you to execute.
Man, that is powerful. Okay, so you master this level. You become the ultimate engineer of your own life.
You're running the spreadsheets.
Right. You know how to bypass your fear response. You know how to externalize failure. You acquire the skills, you overcome the obstacles, and you meticulously execute your strategy to reach the top of the mountain.
We did it.
But then an absolutely terrifying question arises.
And what is that?
What happens if you get to the top, look around, and realize you climbed the wrong mountain?
Yes. That is the existential dread that awaits every pure pragmatist.
It's terrifying to think about. You spend a decade flawlessly executing a strategy, only to realize the goal itself feels empty.
And navigating that crisis, that specific realization, requires abandoning the project management vocabulary entirely.
You have to throw out the spreadsheet.
You do, and you adopt the final, highest tier of language outlined in our source material.
We are entering the C1, C2 mastery phase, the visionary phase.
This represents the summit of the linguistic and psychological roadmap.
And the vocabulary introduced here is incredibly heavy. We move out of logistics and into the realm of profound self-reflection.
It's a totally different ballgame.
It is. The text demands that the speaker distinguish between a job, a career, and a vocation or a calling.
Those are massive distinctions.
Huge. We are introduced to concepts like finding work that is intrinsically rewarding, the desire to leave a legacy, the courage required for pivoting a career, and the ultimate pursuit of self-actualization.
Which is a direct reference to the psychologist Abraham Maslow.
Yes, exactly.
If we look at the underlying implications of these words, what we are witnessing is a radical, almost subversive redefinition of what constitutes success.
It's a complete paradigm shift from the previous level.
Yeah.
I mean, at the analyst stage, success was clearly defined and metric-driven, right?
Yes.
Acquire the management skills, secure the capital, launch the business, hit the quarterly targets, boom, success.
Because the analyst stage inherently accepts society's default definition of success.
Which is
typically the accumulation of wealth, status, and upward mobility. And the analyst simply seeks to optimize the path toward that.
right.
But the visionary stage fundamentally questions the validity of those societal definitions. The source text makes this explicit, noting that society often holds a very narrow definition of achievement. At this level of mastery, you begin to strip away those external metrics.
The example the source provides to illustrate this is striking. They describe this individual who makes the decision to completely pivot their life away from a highly lucrative trajectory in corporate law
Huge leap.
to become an environmental activist.
Yeah.
And they make this drastic change because they realize they are far more concerned with the legacy they leave behind than the salary they draw.
This hinges on that phrase the text introduces.
Yeah.
Intrinsically rewarding.
Let's dig into that.
To understand the weight of this term, you have to contrast it with extrinsic rewards. Extrinsic rewards are everything outside the action itself.
Like the paycheck.
The paycheck, the prestige, the applause, the promotion.
The things you get after the work is done.
Yes. And while those things can drive a career, they can keep you going for years, they rarely sustain a vocation.
Okay, what sustains a vocation then?
A vocation is driven by intrinsic reward. The satisfaction, the meaning, is derived from the execution of the activity itself. The doing is the reward.
You know, the analogy I'd use here is practicing an instrument.
Oh, I like that.
If you are relentlessly running piano scales because your goal is to win a prestigious competition and get the prize money, that is the analyst operating on extrinsic rewards, you are enduring the friction to get the prize.
Right, you're looking at the finish line.
But if you're sitting at the piano playing a complex piece simply because the act of creating that music makes you feel profoundly alive and connected to the world, that is the visionary experiencing an intrinsically rewarding vocation.
The competition doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly. You don't even care if anyone is listening.
And this ties directly into the concept of self-actualization. Maslow's hierarchy dictates that once our basic needs, our safety, and our need for esteem and recognition are met, which is, frankly, often what a successful career provides, we reach a ceiling.
You run out a ladder to climb?
You do. And the only way to continue growing is to pursue self-actualization, which is the desire to become the most authentic, fully realized version of oneself.
Wow.
It is fulfilling your unique potential, regardless of whether society applauds it or pays well for it.
But, you know, looking closely at the text, there's a massive conceptual tension here that I really, really want us to debate.
Let's hear it.
Okay. The text highlights two highly contrasting words to represent this ultimate level of mastery and self-actualization.
Okay.
On one hand, it emphasizes understanding your trajectory. It defines trajectory as the path something follows as it moves forward. To me, a trajectory implies a rigid, predetermined path. Think of a rocket launch. You calculate the physics, you plot the coordinates, you ignite the engines, and the rocket follows the mathematical trajectory. It does not deviate.
That is the standard rigid definition, yes.
But then, almost in the very next breath, the text introduces and heavily praises the word serendipity. It defines serendipity as the occurrence of fortunate, unexpected events by chance.
Right.
And the speaker in the text literally says, I've come to realize that life is less about following a predetermined trajectory and more about being open to serendipity.
Yes, I remember that line.
This feels totally contradictory to me. I mean, if the previous level was all about discipline, smart goals, and filtering out distractions to stay on a trajectory, how can the ultimate mastery level advocate for serendipity?
It seems like a paradox.
It is. How do you reconcile the rigidity of a calculated trajectory with the blind chaos of chance? Aren't they fundamentally opposing forces?
That tension you are identifying right there is the exact crux of what it means to actually reach the summit of self-actualization.
So it's intentional.
Yes. It is not a contradiction. It is a profound synthesis of two seemingly opposing forces.
I need you to break that synthesis down for me because it sounds totally counterintuitive.
Let's consider the cognitive evolution we've traced so far. True mastery, whether we are talking about mastering a language, mastering a complex profession, or mastering the arc of a human life, requires the rigorous discipline to walk a difficult path, paired with the expansive wisdom to recognize when that path is no longer serving you.
The discipline to walk it, but the wisdom to abandon it.
Yes. Think about the pure analyst we discussed earlier.
Emma, the spreadsheet master.
Exactly. The pure analyst has the grit and the strategy to build the rocket and launch it on its trajectory. They are relentlessly focused. But a pure analyst is cognitively blind to anything outside their predetermined scope.
Because they set their sights.
Exactly. If they are halfway to their target and a beautiful, habitable, completely unmapped planet suddenly appears on their radar, the pure analyst ignores it.
Wait, really?
Yes. They filter it out as a distraction because it was not on the original itinerary. They reach their goal, but they might completely miss their destiny.
Wow. Because they locked their sights so hard, they lost their peripheral vision.
Exactly. But the individual who reaches the visionary stage possesses a different architecture. They have the foundational work ethic of the analyst. They know how to execute. They know how to overcome obstacles, but they also possess a deep philosophical flexibility.
They can pivot.
They realize that the overarching goal is not simply to reach the arbitrary coordinate they plotted 5 years ago when they were a less experienced version of themselves. The overarching goal is the ongoing journey towards self-actualization, to live a deeply authentic life.
So the trajectory was just a tool. It was just to get them moving in a generally forward direction.
It creates the initial momentum. It gets you off the launch pad. But if a serendipitous moment occurs, a chance conversation with a stranger, a sudden economic shift, a personal realization during a health crisis, and that moment reveals a new path that is far more authentic and intrinsically rewarding, the visionary has the courage to pivot.
They abandon the trajectory.
They abandon the original trajectory to embrace the serendipity.
Because they recognize that serendipity isn't just blind luck, it's an intersection.
What do you mean by intersection?
Like you have to be prepared enough to actually capitalize on the chance encounter. If you hadn't done all the grueling analytical work of acquiring skills and building discipline in the earlier phases, you wouldn't be capable of recognizing or seizing the serendipitous opportunity when it arises.
That is a crucial point. Serendipity strongly favors the prepared mind. You cannot improvise effectively if you don't know the underlying structures.
It's exactly like a master jazz musician.
Oh, perfect analogy.
Right. A jazz musician doesn't just walk on stage, pick up a saxophone having never played before, and blow random notes, hoping for serendipity.
It would just sound like noise.
It would be awful. They spend 10 years rigidly studying music theory, mastering their scales, and building immense technical discipline, which is the analyst phase, the trajectory.
Right.
They do all that grueling work so that when they finally get on stage, they can throw the sheet music away, listen to what the bassist is doing in that exact millisecond, and improvise something entirely new and brilliant.
That is the C2 phase in a nutshell.
You master the rules so that you know precisely how and when to break them in service of a higher, more authentic expression.
That captures the essence of it beautifully. The vocabulary at this level gives you the framework to understand that your goals are not your master. They are simply the stepping stones you use to navigate the unknown.
So as we pull all these linguistic and psychological threads together, the question really turns to you, the listener.
It always comes back to application.
Always. We've mapped out this massive evolution from passive desire all the way up to self-actualization. I think the most important takeaway from this deep dive is to actively audit your own life by auditing the words you are currently using.
Listen to yourself.
Yeah. When you talk about your daily reality, your current projects, and your vision for your future, which level of vocabulary truly dominates your narrative? Are you stuck at the foundation, passively stating that you want things, waiting for permission, and viewing your daily labor simply as a job to pay the bills?
Or are you operating at the analyst level?
Right.
Are you treating your life like a massive, highly optimized spreadsheet, relentlessly executing a career strategy, hitting every metric, but perhaps, beginning to feel a sense of emptiness or disconnection from the deeper reason why you are working so hard?
Or are you pushing into the visionary tier? Are you asking yourself the difficult, heavy questions about your legacy, your vocation, and what it actually means to be self-actualized?
A big question.
Are you open to serendipity? Or are you stubbornly trapped on a trajectory you plotted years ago, terrified to pivot, even though you know in your gut it's the wrong mountain?
The source material encapsulates this journey powerfully at the end. It points out that understanding this linguistic progression demonstrates how a question as simple as, "What are your goals?" can open the door to a conversation that is as basic or as profoundly philosophical as you want it to be.
Yeah.
Having the vocabulary for every single level gives you the power to choose the depth of your reality.
It gives you the power to choose. Which brings me to one final thought I want to leave you with, building on everything we've just discussed.
Okay.
The very last line of the source document says, "Your voice is the first tool you need to turn your dreams into reality."
It's a great line.
It is. And throughout the text, they continually frame this idea around external conversations. They talk about using this language in job interviews or when networking or when explaining your ambitions to your friends and family.
Right, out loud to others.
But if we truly embrace the concepts of living an authentic life and achieving self-actualization, I want to pose a totally different angle.
What is that?
What if the most vital application of this vocabulary isn't for job interviews? What if it isn't for impressing your peers? What if the absolute most crucial place this language operates is within your own internal monologue?
Oh, the invisible narrative you are constantly running in your own mind.
Yes. Think about the concept of linguistic relativity, the idea that the structure of a language affects its speaker's worldview or cognition.
Right. If you don't have a word for it, can you even think it?
Exactly. The ceiling of your own potential might be strictly and permanently limited by the vocabulary you use to speak to yourself in the dark when no one else is listening and no one else is around to impress.
That's a heavy thought.
If you do not possess the conceptual framework for a word like serendipity, or if you cannot clearly articulate the philosophical difference between a job and a vocation within your own mind, can you ever actually achieve them?
You can't.
Right. Can you build a towering, complex, beautiful life if the only cognitive blueprint you know how to draw is for a simple shed?
It really represents the ultimate constraint on human potential. If you do not have the language to name the destination, you literally cannot navigate toward it. You remain blind to it, even if it is right in front of you.
So as you move forward this week, take a very hard, honest look at the blueprints you are drafting in your own head. Listen to the words you use when you think about your future. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Question your vocabulary, examine the mechanics of your internal narrative, and remember that the words you choose are not just describing your reality, they are actively building it. We'll see you next time.
Every single day, you do something probably 3 times a day without even realizing that it's secretly mapping the exact limits of your intellect.
Right, yeah.
You eat. Exactly, you eat. But, we aren't talking about calories today or macros or recipes. We're actually diving into how the words you use to describe your lunch reveal exactly how evolved your brain is.
It almost sounds kind of absurd when you frame it that way.
It really does.
But there's this concept, linguistic relativity, the idea that the language you possess actually dictates the boundaries of what you can perceive. And it is profoundly visible at the dinner table.
So it's like if you literally lack the vocabulary to describe, say, a complex flavor or a global supply chain.
You're essentially blind to it.
Yeah.
The food passes through your digestive system, sure, but it completely bypasses your cognitive system.
Wow. Because we just think, we're just chewing and swallowing.
Right.
But we are actually participating in this highly structured cognitive exercise. And the source material we have for this deep dive today is just fascinating.
It really is.
It's this transcript from a language learning curriculum that maps out human language acquisition regarding food. And they don't just throw random words into a dictionary. They map it out into 4 distinct fluency levels.
Yeah, starting from the basic survival language, which they categorize as the A2 level, and then escalating all the way up to absolute mastery, the C1 and C2 levels.
And the mission for our deep dive today isn't just about passing a vocabulary test or whatever.
No, not at all.
We're using this multi-level guide to essentially trace the evolution of our entire relationship with food. It's like digging through the archaeological layers of human evolution. Right?
That's a great way to put it.
We start as these primal animals foraging in the woods, and then we end up as, philosophers debating the ethics of global agriculture.
Which means the words you pull from your mental filing cabinet when someone asks you, hey, how was your meal? Those words completely shape your culinary reality.
So if you're operating with the linguistic tools of a toddler, your experience of the world is, it's pretty binary.
Yeah, exactly. Binary and completely reactive. But if you possess the vocabulary of a food systems analyst, your experience is entirely different. You're tasting the history, the economics, the chemistry, all at the same time.
It's wild. So for you listening right now, we are going to deconstruct the words you use every day to show you how your language has evolved. And we have to start at the absolute bottom of that linguistic ladder.
The foundation, the A2 level.
Right, the A2 foundation. The primal language of taste, where vocabulary isn't really about nuance or art at all. It's literally a biological alarm system.
Yeah, because at this foundational tier, your communication is entirely tethered to basic survival.
Survival, right.
The verbs available to a speaker here are just blunt instruments. It's like love, don't like, and hate. That's it.
So I love chocolate or I hate onions.
Exactly. The nuance of why you feel a certain way just doesn't exist yet in the language. The language is simply operating as a mechanism to signal to the rest of the tribe whether a substance should be ingested or avoided.
It is a pure binary. You see a toddler throw a piece of broccoli across the kitchen floor, right?
Oh, yeah. We've all seen that.
They aren't executing some critical review of the vegetable's cellular structure, or how it was prepared.
No, the amygdala is just taken over.
Right. The primal part of the brain forces this physical rejection, and the language just yelling, "I hate it," is literally just the vocalization of a physical reflex.
And that vocalization pairs with a very specific, limited set of adjectives. The fundamental taste descriptors.
Which are what? The basic 5?
Yeah. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and the source adds spicy in there too.
Okay. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, spicy.
And these aren't arbitrary categories that some chef just invented. They are direct translations of the chemical receptors on the human tongue.
So language mapping perfectly to biology.
Exactly. I mean, we developed the word sweet because our evolutionary ancestors desperately needed a way to identify and communicate when they found dense, fast-acting carbohydrates.
Right. Sugar is survival.
And we developed salty because we require trace minerals for our cellular function. So the language maps directly on to biological imperatives.
And then the negative words, they're basically the warning labels, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I sort of think about this A2 level, like drawing with primary colors. You just have red, blue, and yellow. You really can't paint a photorealistic masterpiece of a bowl of soup because you just don't have the shading.
Right, you don't have the blending.
Yeah, exactly. But you can very effectively communicate your most crucial life-saving boundaries. Like the word sour is just a flashing red light for spoilage.
Or fermentation, yeah. And bitter is the ultimate klaxon. It's the loudest alarm.
Because bitter usually means poison?
Exactly. In nature, toxicity is almost always bitter. Alkaloids in poisonous plants trigger this violent, immediate repulsion in us.
So when you say, "I hate bitter things," you're really saying...
You're essentially saying, I refuse to be poisoned.
Wow.
But what is so critical to understand about this A2 baseline is the complete lack of agency.
How do you mean?
Well, the speaker is entirely passive. The food is an external object that just acts upon the human.
Oh, I see.
The human just receives the sensory data and issues a verdict based on hardwired genetic programming.
So you're basically just a meat machine reacting to chemical inputs.
Pretty much.
Like someone hands you a cup of super dark, over-extracted black coffee, and your tongue detects the complex alkaloids, and your brain just screams danger.
Right. You just recoil. You don't analyze the roasting process. You just want it away from you.
But, here's the problem with just having primary colors. If you think about the listener navigating a dinner party with just, "I love it" or "I hate it," eventually the environment changes, right?
It has to. We didn't just stay foraging for raw berries forever.
Right. We discovered fire. We invented tools.
And when human behavior shifted from that passive foraging to the active manipulation of the environment, the language of primary colors just completely broke down.
It wasn't enough anymore.
No. You cannot describe the transformation of raw ingredients using only the words sweet or bitter. And that forces the evolution into the next linguistic tier.
The B1 level, the explorer.
Yes. This is where language shifts from describing what food is to describing what we do to it. We essentially enter the kitchen sandbox.
I love that phrase, the kitchen sandbox, because this is really the birth of agency, isn't it? We get action verbs.
We do. Words like chop, boil, fry, bake, grill, roast.
And the anthropological significance of these verbs is just, it's massive, right?
It cannot be overstated. When a speaker uses the word boil or fry, they're demonstrating mastery over thermodynamics.
Thermodynamics in the kitchen.
Exactly. There's a primatologist, Richard Wrangham, who famously argued that cooking is actually what made us human.
Oh, wait, really? Just the act of cooking?
Yeah, because applying thermal energy to food essentially pre-digests it. It makes the calories far more accessible.
So we don't have to spend all our energy just digesting raw leaves.
Right. That shrank our digestive tracts and gave us the surplus energy required to grow these massive energy-hungry brains.
Oh, wow.
So when language develops verbs for cooking, it is literally documenting the very mechanism that allowed human intelligence to flourish.
That is insane. So you take a raw potato, which is, hard and dense and basically indigestible. You apply boiling water. You structurally change it.
Yes.
And because the physical structure changes, our language has to invent a whole new category of adjectives.
We move past taste and we arrive at architecture.
Texture.
Texture, exactly. Words like creamy, crunchy, tender.
So when I say something is crunchy,
you're using a structural blueprint. When you describe a fresh vegetable or a chip as crunchy, you are communicating precise data about its cellular walls holding turgor pressure.
Turgor pressure. I definitely didn't think of it that way.
You're signaling optimal freshness. And when you describe a cut of meat as tender, you are detailing the successful breakdown of collagen and connective tissue through applied heat.
So you're no longer just reacting to a flavor, you are evaluating an engineering process.
Precisely.
Okay, but I'm going to push back on this evaluation aspect for a second.
Go for it.
Because at this exact same level of linguistic development, B1, people start heavily relying on words like delicious or tasty.
True. Yeah.
And to me, honestly, delicious is a completely hollow, useless word.
You think so?
I mean, it's just a lazy catch-all. If I ask you how the meal is and you just say delicious, you haven't told me anything about the structure or the thermal process or the chemistry.
You're not getting any architectural data.
Exactly. You've just dressed up the primal A2 word love in a fancier suit. Shouldn't we be demanding architectural texture words instead? Like, tell me it's crunchy or creamy so I can actually paint a picture.
I mean, it is entirely subjective, yes. But to dismiss delicious as hollow kind of misses its cognitive function at this stage of human development.
What cognitive function?
Well, delicious is the linguistic bridge between the biological and the social.
Okay, how so?
The A2 level, saying I love it, is a very selfish, internal, biological state.
Right, it's just about my amygdala.
But saying this is delicious is an external social declaration. It projects a holistic judgment into the public sphere.
Oh, I see.
It encompasses the crunchy texture, the thermal comfort, the savory taste all at once, and it offers it up as a shared reality for the whole table. It is the beginning of consensus.
So it's basically the beginning of the dinner party.
Exactly.
You're bringing other people into your sensory experience.
Furthermore, this stage introduces a really profound psychological shift, which is dietary identity. This is where language completely overrides our primal programming. We develop terms like vegetarian, vegan, and this whole concept of a balanced diet.
And the phrase cutting down on, like I am cutting down on sugar or fried food, that actually fascinates me.
Why is that?
Because at the primal A2 level, sugar equals energy, therefore sugar equals survival, therefore I love sugar. End of thought process, right?
Right. It's very simple.
But suddenly, we invent this linguistic construct of cutting down on. It's like we're fighting our own instincts.
Because the prefrontal cortex has officially entered the chat.
Ah, the planner.
The frontal lobe, which handles long-term planning and consequence evaluation, is now wrestling with the amygdala. Using a phrase like cutting down on introduces the entire dimension of time into food language.
Oh, wow. Time.
Yeah, because A2 is trapped in the eternal present. This tastes sweet right now.
But B1 projects into the future.
Exactly. If I consume this sweet thing now, what is the metabolic consequence tomorrow?
So we are actively fighting our own evolution. And we use these labels, like vegan or vegetarian, as modern tribal markers.
They absolutely are tribal markers.
Like, if you tell a coworker you are a vegan, you aren't just giving them a list of ingredients you avoid.
No, you're telegraphing a massive packet of data.
Right. You're telling them about your worldview, your ethics, your self-discipline.
You are curating a public persona. When someone specifies that they are, say, grilling chicken rather than frying it, while maintaining a balanced diet, they are signaling their alignment with modern wellness culture.
It's all about status.
They are utilizing language to demonstrate control over their environment and their own biology.
But, you know, here is where the kitchen sandbox kind of hits its limit.
Right.
Because you can only control your own biology for so long before you start looking around at what everybody else is eating.
Human nature.
Once we figure out how to feed ourselves efficiently and we form our little dietary tribes, we want to evaluate, we want to compare and judge. So we leave the home kitchen and we step into the restaurant.
And this transition forces the evolution to the B2 tier. The analyst.
The critic's vocabulary.
Exactly. The language of the home cook is totally insufficient for the critic. We are no longer describing raw biological fuel or simple thermal processes here.
We're evaluating food as an art form.
As a formalized art form, yes. And the most significant linguistic leap at this stage is the complete abandonment of single-note tastes in favor of the flavor profile.
The flavor profile. Let's use a musical analogy for the listener here.
Sure.
If the primal tastes sweet, sour, salty, are like hitting a single key on a piano with one finger, just a flat Ding!
Right, very simple.
The flavor profile is like striking a complex, dissonant jazz chord. It's playing 5 keys simultaneously, and if you hit the wrong keys together, it creates this sensory dissonance.
Right, and to describe that complex chord, the language has to fracture into high-resolution nuance. We adopt words like subtle, intense, zesty, aromatic, and earthy.
Earthy is such a wild concept when you really stop to think about it.
It really is.
I mean, if I say a beet salad or a mushroom risotto is earthy, I am literally acknowledging that I am tasting the dirt it grew in.
You're tasting the soil, yeah.
I am connecting the plate back to the forest floor. And the fact that we view tasting soil as a positive, elevated culinary experience just shows how far we've drifted from just trying to get enough calories to survive the winter.
It demonstrates the absolute luxury of analysis.
Yeah.
And when a culture reaches this level of analysis, it inevitably discovers the gaps in its own vocabulary. It realizes that its native language is actually missing colors on the palette.
So what happens then?
Well, this is perfectly illustrated by the adoption of the word umami.
Oh, umami, the magical fifth taste.
Savory, meaty, deep.
It's so crucial for things like Japanese cuisine, like ramen or mushroom risotto.
Exactly. And the thing is, for centuries, Western cultures possessed the biological receptors for glutamate, which is the amino acid responsible for that rich, deep flavor of aged cheeses, cured meats, slow-simmered broths.
So we pasted it.
We tasted it, we enjoyed it, we relied upon it, yet the English language completely lacked a specific, distinct noun for it.
We just didn't have the word.
We had to use these clumsy approximations like savory or brothy. We had a massive cognitive blind spot.
Because if you don't have the word, you can't isolate the concept in your mind.
Exactly. It wasn't until the early 20th century that a Japanese chemist, Kikunai Ikeda, actually isolated the chemical compound and named it umami.
And then we just took it.
The West eventually borrowed the term wholesale. And integrating umami into our vocabulary is a profound act of linguistic outsourcing.
Linguistic outsourcing, I like that.
It's an admission that our own cultural lens was insufficient to capture the full spectrum of sensory reality, so we had to import a concept to upgrade our own cognitive software.
We literally patched an update into the English language so we could properly eat a bowl of ramen.
Very much, yeah.
That implies that food is no longer just local, though. It's an institution. We stop talking about food and we start talking about cuisine.
Cuisine implies structure. It implies history and geography. It elevates cooking from just a daily chore to an identifiable cultural legacy.
Like Mexican cuisine with its zesty, spicy, smoky chipotle flavors, or Southeast Asian cuisine.
Exactly. And because it is a formalized institution, it becomes subject to formal critique.
The critic.
The B2 vocabulary gives us the tools of the critic. We start evaluating things like presentation, we start demanding high-quality ingredients, and we start using phrases like living up to the hype.
Okay, I have a serious problem with the phrase living up to the hype.
Really?
When we start asking if a restaurant lives up to the hype, haven't we fundamentally destroyed the act of dining?
How so?
We are no longer eating a meal for nourishment. We aren't even eating it for the flavor profile anymore. We are eating the social consensus.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
We are comparing the physical object on our plate against this invisible collective expectation that's generated by, Instagram, food blogs, Michelin guides.
You're describing the commodification of experience. The food itself becomes secondary to the social capital you gain by consuming it. And this is codified by the B2 concept of the culinary experience.
Right.
When you label a meal a culinary experience, like a complex Japanese and Peruvian fusion dish, you are placing it in the exact same cognitive category as attending a symphony or viewing an art exhibition.
The diner transforms into an audience member,
Yeah.
but doesn't that distance you from the reality of what you're actually doing?
In what sense?
If you are sitting there with a clipboard in your mind, checking off zesty undertones and aromatic presentation and judging whether the chef's vision aligns with the hype, you are completely alienated from the simple, grounded joy of eating.
You're overthinking it.
You've intellectualized the taco so much that you've ruined it.
Well, the burden of the analyst is the loss of innocence.
Wow, that's deep.
You cannot return to the blissful ignorance of the A2 toddler, who simply loves or hates. Once you have the vocabulary to see the gears turning behind the restaurant doors, you literally cannot unsee them.
You're trapped in the critique.
But this hyper-awareness is a necessary evolutionary step. Because if you only stop at analyzing the restaurant, you are still wearing blinders. You have to push to the plate to see the world that actually produced it.
Which brings us to the absolute zenith of human food language, the mountaintop. The C1 and C2 scholar.
The highest level.
This is where the food transcends the dining room entirely. We stop looking at the meal through a microscope, and we start looking at it through a satellite feed.
Yeah, at the highest levels of fluency, language becomes a system of systems. We adopt massive interdisciplinary concepts like gastronomy.
The art and science of good eating.
Right. And a true gastronome doesn't just know that a regional French wine has an earthy flavor profile.
They know everything about it.
They understand the mineral composition of the regional soil, the historical weather patterns, the labor economics of the harvest, and the political treaties that govern its export.
It's systems thinking. And this is where the language gets really heavy, because it forces us to confront the invisible, often ugly realities of how 8 billion people feed themselves.
It does. Our vocabulary splits into these intense ethical juxtapositions. And the prime example from the source material is the tension between the farm-to-table movement and the concept of food miles. These two terms perfectly encapsulate the modern existential anxiety surrounding globalized agriculture.
Existential anxiety, really.
Absolutely. Think about it. Farm-to-table is a linguistic attempt to reclaim intimacy.
Oh, like getting back to basics.
It is a desperate reach backward toward the B1 home kitchen, demanding transparency, seasonality, and a direct relationship with the producer. It's a complete rejection of industrial opacity.
We want to know the farmer's name. We want to feel grounded.
Right.
But the reality for most of the developed world is defined by food miles.
Unfortunately, yes.
Let's meticulously unpack the example of a winter strawberry, because, the sheer logistical violence required to put a fresh strawberry in a New York supermarket in the middle of January is staggering.
It is a triumph of industrial engineering and a catastrophe of environmental sustainability all at once.
So track it for me, that single strawberry.
Well, that single strawberry must be cultivated in an equatorial climate. It's harvested by manual labor, immediately plunged into an unbroken cold chain refrigeration system, flown across continents via jet freight, trucked along interstate highways, and then finally displayed under synthetic lighting.
All before it goes bad.
All before its delicate cellular structure collapses.
The carbon footprint of that one single berry is astronomical. But if you don't possess the term food miles, that entire invisible supply chain just remains hidden from you.
You don't even perceive it.
You just see a red fruit and your primal A2 brain says, sweet, I love it.
Right.
The C1 vocabulary is what forces you to articulate the cost. It completely shatters the illusion.
Because language is the prerequisite for accountability.
Say more about that.
Without the vocabulary to describe systemic supply chain impacts, environmental degradation just remains this vague, formless anxiety. But the moment you name it food miles, you can measure it, you can critique it, and you can legislate against it.
It makes it real. But, the paradoxes at this level are wild.
Oh, they are everywhere.
Because while half of this C-level vocabulary is obsessed with getting back to nature, the other half is obsessed with playing God.
Ah, yes.
We have to talk about molecular gastronomy, the absolute extreme of scientific manipulation, like hot ice cream or olive oil turned into a fine white powder.
Molecular gastronomy represents the ultimate victory of human intellect over raw biological material.
It's crazy.
It takes the B1 concept of cooking, which is just applying heat to change structure, and extrapolates it to its absolute physical limits using centrifuges, liquid nitrogen, and hydrocolloids.
It just strips food of its natural context.
And rebuilds it at a molecular level.
Well, I'm going to draw a hard line in the sand right here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Molecular gastronomy is an edible parlor trick.
A parlor trick.
It is not food. When you manipulate the chemical structure of an olive so fundamentally that it becomes a dust you inhale, you have completely severed the final thread connecting us to our evolutionary history.
You think so?
You have lost the plot. It is pure arrogance.
I think you're falling into the trap of the naturalistic fallacy there.
The naturalistic fallacy.
Yeah, assuming that because something is close to its raw natural state, it is inherently superior or more authentic.
Isn't it?
Was it arrogance when the first early human threw a raw piece of meat into a fire to change its chemical composition?
Oh, no, that was survival.
Molecular gastronomy is simply the modern continuation of that exact same human impulse.
But turning olive oil into dust.
It is an exploration of the physical universe through the medium of the human palate. It challenges your preconceived notions of what texture and temperature can even be. To many, it is the purest form of culinary philosophy.
But it's soulless. It has no anchor, which is why I think the counterweight to molecular gastronomy is the single most beautiful concept in this entire linguistic map. Food as intangible cultural heritage.
That is a very powerful concept.
Intangible cultural heritage is the recognition that our most valuable monuments aren't always built of stone.
They're practices.
Right. They are practices, rituals, and knowledge passed down through generations. Like a grandmother teaching her grandchild the specific, unwritten technique for kneading a traditional holiday bread.
She is transmitting a cultural artifact just as significant as a painting or a poem.
Exactly. The bread isn't important because of its macronutrients. It's not important because it has an intense flavor profile. It is important because it is a tether to the ancestors.
It's a through line.
It grounds the human being in a specific time, a specific place, and a specific lineage. Molecular gastronomy tries to delete history to create something novel. But intangible cultural heritage relies entirely on history to create meaning.
And the fascinating thing is, a speaker operating at the highest level of fluency can hold both of these wildly contradictory realities in their mind simultaneously.
The duality of it.
They can appreciate the chemical wizardry of a hydrocolloid sphere while fiercely defending the generational continuity of a rustic loaf of bread.
Which brings us to the final test of the C-level speaker.
The fads.
The ability to see through the noise, the critical analysis of ephemeral fads, the whole superfood complex.
The term ephemeral is really crucial here. It denotes a phenomenon that burns brightly and vanishes quickly, totally lacking any structural permanence.
Like the cyclical obsession with superfoods.
Whether it's acai berries, chia seeds, or maca powder, it is a masterful manipulation of our linguistic and biological vulnerabilities.
It literally weaponizes everything we've talked about today.
Not so.
Think about it. The marketers use the A2 promise of life-saving vitality. Eat this and survive.
Right.
Then they use the B1 language of health and identity to make you feel disciplined. Add this to your balanced diet.
Oh, absolutely.
Then they use the B2 language of exotic cuisines to make it feel premium.
And they bypass the C1 critical thinking by slapping a green natural label on it.
Exactly. While completely ignoring the food miles and the labor exploitation required to harvest those berries in the Andes and ship them to some overpriced smoothie shop in London.
And unmasking that charade requires a complete synthesis of every fluency level we've discussed.
You have to fire on all cylinders.
You must understand the biological claims, evaluate the sensory reality, and audit the global supply chain. This is why language matters so much.
It changes everything.
When you possess this vocabulary, your grocery cart ceases to be a mere collection of calories. It becomes a voting booth.
A voting booth, I love that.
Every single purchase is a deeply informed endorsement of a specific ecological system, a labor practice, and a cultural philosophy.
You are basically reading the ballot of global agriculture every time you shop.
You really are.
It's a staggering journey when you look at it all at once. We started this deep dive huddled in the cave, operating on that A2 primal survival instinct.
Binary choices.
Figuring out what wouldn't poison us using just the primary colors of sweet, sour, and bitter.
Then we discovered fire, moving into the B1 explorer phase. We gained agency over our environment, utilizing structural texture words, applying thermal energy through verbs like boiling and grilling, and constructing our public identities by declaring ourselves vegans or carefully managing our diets.
Then we sought public validation as the B2 analyst. We built the restaurant critics vocabulary, analyzing complex flavor profiles and zesty undertones, borrowing foreign words like umami just to fill our own cognitive blind spots.
And debating whether a curated culinary experience lived up to the social hype.
Before finally ascending to the C1 and C2 scholar, zooming out to orbit where we analyze the staggering logistics of food miles against the romanticism of farm to table.
Where we debate the scientific hubris of molecular gastronomy against the deep ancestral roots of intangible cultural heritage.
And where we learn to deflect the manipulation of ephemeral fads. It really is the ultimate proof that learning the vocabulary of a subject isn't just about memorizing a dictionary.
Not at all.
It is about expanding the actual dimensions of your consciousness. The words you choose to use actively construct the reality you live in. They dictate your relationship with the physical plate in front of you, and by extension, your relationship with the entire planet.
But, if we follow this trajectory to its logical conclusion, it actually presents a rather fascinating, unresolved problem,
Oh,
a horizon we haven't crossed yet.
I think I know where you're going with this. The future of the language itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If our language has had to painfully evolve all the way to this sophisticated systemic C2 level just to describe our current reality,
Right. The soil-based, farm-to-table, globalized agriculture.
what happens when that reality ceases to exist? What is the next level of food language?
The C3 level.
We are standing on the precipice of a radical technological disruption in how the human species produces its calories. We're entering the era of cellular agriculture.
Lab-grown meat.
Lab-grown meats cultivated directly from stem cells in a bioreactor, without an animal ever being born, raised, or slaughtered. Precision fermentation utilizing engineered microbes to brew dairy proteins without a single cow involved.
And artificial intelligence generating entirely novel, hyper-optimized flavor profiles that no human chef, bound by traditional culinary history, would ever organically conceive.
So how do you evaluate the food miles of a steak that was 3D printed in a laboratory 3 blocks from your apartment?
You can't.
How do you describe the earthy undertones of a vegetable analog that has never, in its entire cellular existence, touched a single gram of actual soil?
Does the concept of intangible cultural heritage even survive when the grandmother's recipe is replaced by a constantly updating machine learning algorithm that just optimizes for maximum dopamine release on your A2 taste receptors?
It's a completely new paradigm.
We're going to have to invent an entirely new, undiscovered tier of vocabulary just to describe the ethics, the textures, and honestly, the existential dread of consuming things that have zero origin in the natural world.
The linguistic map will have to be redrawn from scratch. We will need new primary colors for an entirely synthetic canvas.
It really makes you look at your kitchen completely differently. We've spent this entire time analyzing the evolutionary machinery of our language, only to realize the machine itself is about to become obsolete.
It is.
So the next time you sit down to eat, take a hard look at the food in front of you, pay very close attention to the words silently forming in your mind, and ask yourself, what level are you really eating at today?
A profound question to ruminate on.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.